Hi everyone, today we're going to learn about John Cabot. But before we start on John Cabot, let's review some of the things that we've already learned. Let's talk about the parts of the United States where we could find Spanish missions. Do you remember some of those states? Ones like Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Where did we say was the oldest continuously inhabited European settlement in the continental United States? That was St. Augustine in Florida. And then how were the conquistadors and the missionaries, Spanish missionaries, similar? They were both trying to change the ways that the Native Americans lived. How were they different? The conquistadors, remember that's the Spanish word for conqueror, were trying to change them by force, while the missionaries were trying to do it by converting them or changing them to Christianity and teaching them European ways. Today we're going to talk about John Cabot, who was an explorer like Christopher Columbus, and he was also looking for a shorter route to Asia. But unlike Columbus, John Cabot thought he could travel to Asia using a shorter route than Columbus tried. Cabot used his knowledge of latitude and longitude to find the shorter route. And a good way to remember, lines of longitude go up and down, and lines of latitude go round and round. Okay, so listen to hear how this knowledge shaped his ideas on how to navigate westward across the Atlantic Ocean. Earlier, we learned about Christopher Columbus, who was an Italian explorer who sailed to represent Spain's interests. Today, you're going to hear about John Cabot, another Italian explorer who sailed to represent England's interests. We know very little about the early years of Cabot's life. Historians believe he was born in Genoa, Italy, the same place as Christopher Columbus. He was also born around the same time as Christopher Columbus. In his early years, John Cabot was known by his Italian name, Giovanni Cabuto. He lived for many years in the Italian city of Venice, where he worked as a merchant and sailor. His work in Venice led him to travel along the coasts of countries in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, where he developed his navigational skills. As a merchant, he began to think he could obtain spices more quickly and cheaply by finding a westward water route that would take him to the east. In 1493, Cabot and many Europeans learned that Christopher Columbus had had an idea very similar to Cabot's, finding a water route to Asia by traveling west. After several years in Venice, Cabot relocated to Bristol, England. Shortly thereafter, Cabot took steps to embark on a voyage on his own, but one that was slightly different from Christopher Columbus. Cabot had a simple idea. He knew the earth was spherical, or round like a ball, and he knew that one of the properties of a sphere is that the distance around it is greater or larger at the middle, or its circumference, and it's less at the top or bottom. If you apply this basic geometry to Earth, it means the circumference of the Earth is greatest at the equator and is significantly less north or south of the equator. Think about a basketball. The circumference of a basketball, or the distance around it, if you measure it in the very middle, is 30 inches. The distance around the same ball, if you measure it at a point closer to the top, is only 15 inches. John Cabot thought Columbus had made a strategic mistake in his attempts to sail to the East Indies. Columbus had sailed in the middle latitudes close to the equator, where the distances would be longest. Cabot thought he could get to the East Indies faster by sailing at a more northerly latitude, where the distances would be shorter. He proposed heading north, hoping to find a northwest passage to Asia and the East Indies. Cabot tried to find sponsors and investors to support his voyage to find the Northwest Passage. In 1496, Henry VII, the King of England, decided to sponsor Cabot. Merchants in Bristol helped support the voyage as well. Henry VII gave Cabot permission to explore and claim unknown lands for England. Cabot was also encouraged to find bring any merchandise he acquired back to Bristol, England. Cabot was told he would enjoy a great share of the trade profits if his voyage was successful. Cabot attempted 3 voyages across the Atlantic. The first voyage attempt from Bristol, England, was not a success. He and his men encountered terrible weather and ran short on supplies. In addition, Cabot had some disagreements with his crew regarding the route. With all the misfortunes that took place on the onset of the voyage, Cabot eventually decided to turn around and just sail back to Bristol. His second voyage was more successful. Again, he had only one ship. It was a small ship called the Matthew, with a crew of just 18 men. Cabot and his men set sail from Bristol in May of 1497. They sailed past Ireland and across the Atlantic. On June 24th, they sighted land. Historians think Cabot made landfall somewhere in the area of southern Labrador, Newfoundland, or Cape Breton Island in present-day Canada, but the exact location is not known for sure. Cabot did not spend much time on land. It appears that he and his men got off the ship only once and did not wander inland more than a few hundred feet. They did not encounter any Native Americans, but did find signs of their settlement. John Cabot claimed the land for England, collected some fresh water, and got back on board his ship. Cabot and his men spent time exploring the coast of the area now known as Cabot Strait, a channel 60 miles wide between northern Cape Breton Island and southwestern Newfoundland. On their exploration of the coast, Cabot and his crew discovered some very good fishing grounds. As far as we know, Cabot was the first European to set foot in this part of North America since the Vikings had around the year AD 1000. John Cabot returned to England and went to visit King Henry VII, certain he had explored the northeast coast of Asia. He reported to the king that he had discovered wonderful land in a place with a good climate. He mentioned the superb fishing grounds of which England could make great use. This discovery made King Henry VII very happy because at the time of Cabot's voyage, fish was a very expensive commodity. Seeing that his discoveries were welcome, Cabot decided to return to the land he explored and sail until he reached another land in Asia full of spices and riches. That land today is called Japan. In February 1498, he received permission from King Henry VII to embark on another voyage. Very little is known of this third voyage, though. Historians don't know for sure, but this voyage probably involved around 200 men and maybe 5 ships. Unfortunately, when Cabot and his expedition set off, one of his ships became damaged, and the whole fleet had to stop in Ireland due to severe storms. Cabot was supposedly not heard from again, and some historians think he even died on this voyage. Other historians think that he returned from his voyage and lived in London for a short time until about 1500. There is little evidence about this voyage or the whereabouts of Cabot after it, so historians cannot really be sure of what happened. John Cabot was like Christopher Columbus in many ways. Both were born in Genoa, Italy. Both convinced foreign kings to sponsor their explorations. Both attempted to sail to the East Indies and ended up finding something else altogether. John Cabot's explorations proved very important for England. His attempts to find a northwest passage to the East Indies failed, but finding and claiming land on the continent of North America instead were essential for England to later establish the British colonies. Thanks, guys. Talk to you later.